Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to the Weigh In Podcast, our third episode of our Meet the Fighters series and our final in the women's divisions, as we are now set to take on the 135-pound division that is the Bantamweights. We are going to meet the top 15 as well as the champion and one extra fighter as well. We will get to her towards the end. I'll explain once we get there. But for the time being, let's kick things off with number 15 as we have done. And at number 15 at 135 pounds, we have the Brazilian Luana Santos. Santos is 10-2 in her career. Notable wins for her include Maria Agapova and Juliana Miller. She did begin her UFC career at flyweight before moving up to bantamweight in her last two fights. She's a good submission game, as she has won 50% of her fights by way of submission, 5 of her 6 finishes by submission, and 3 career victories via Americana, a very unique submission for Luana Santos that she likes to go for. A big thing for her, she's only 25 years old, so plenty of room to grow. I think she's going to be a very interesting name to keep an eye on as we head into 2025, or I'm sorry, 2026. Um, and I can't wait to see her compete this year. Moving on to the number 14 contender, and that is the Panamanian. We don't see many fighters from Panama in the UFC, but we do have one here, and that is Jocelyn Edwards. She is 16-6 in her career with notable wins over Priscilla Cachoeira, Luchi Pudilova, and Ji Yeon Kim. She is the former Panama Fight League and King of the Cage bantamweight champion. She has very good striking. She has won 44% of her fights, or 44% of her wins have come by way of TKO. That is 7 of her 11 finished victories. But she has had a problem making the bantamweight limit. She has missed weight 3 times in the UFC, and that was 3 times in 5 fights. She has gotten it together as of late. She had 2 fights in 2025. She made weight for both and won both with first round knockouts. So Jocelyn Edwards overall is on a 3-fight win streak. If she can get her weight down, she might be okay moving forward. She's just going to have to hone that in. Like I said, she did a lot better with that last year. Hopefully, she continues to do better with that moving forward. She does have a fight on the books against Nora Cornell coming up later this year on February 21st. Going to be an interesting fight, and we will get to Nora Cornell in a little bit. But before we do, we have a legend and a pioneer of women's MMA coming in at number 13, a former fan favorite and the former champion of this division, and that is, of course, the Cupcake, Miesha Tate. She is 20-10 in her career with notable wins coming over Julia Avila, Holly Holm, Jessica Ai, Sarah McMahon, Liz Carmouche, Julie Kedzie, and Marlos Conan back in the Strikeforce days. As I mentioned, Miesha is the former UFC Bantamweight champion. She won the title off of Holly Holm with that Hail Mary of a rear naked choke in the 5th round. Of course, did not defend that title successfully. She did lose it to Amanda Nunes immediately after she got it. But still, that moment was one of the most incredible in the division's history. And actually, where this picture came from, Miesha celebrating after she won the title. She was also the former champion of Strikeforce. She won that title against Marlos Conan and immediately lost it to Ronda Rousey, unfortunately. But a legend of the game, and Ronda, of course, her biggest rival and one of the biggest rivalries in the history of women's MMA, Ronda Rousey and Miesha Tate. She does have 5 performance bonuses in her UFC career as well. And unfortunately for Miesha, she is 39 years old. We are not going to be seeing her much longer. I did see an interview fairly recently, a few months ago, where she did say she has 1 fight left on her UFC contract. She would probably fight that out and be done. So unfortunately, Miesha Tate, if she fights again, it will only be one more time, according to her. She has retired before, came back, and it does not seem like we're going to be seeing her much more. But nonetheless, an absolute legend in the game, and hopefully they can get her a good retirement fight. Moving on to the number 12 contender, and this is a fighter that we've already mentioned in this video, and that is Nora Cornell of France. She is 9-3 in her career. Notable wins for her do include Haley Cohen and Jocelyn Edwards, so they will be rematching when they fight on February 21st. Unfortunate thing for her, she has fought 5 times in the UFC, won 3 times, and she missed weight in 2 of those 3 wins. That is just incredibly unfortunate. And ironically, Jocelyn Edwards has had trouble with her weight. The one fighter that Nora Cornell made weight against and which she won was her fight against Jocelyn Edwards. So again, same thing as Jocelyn. She just needs to hone that in. She does have a couple unfortunate losses when she did make weight to Jacqueline Cavalcante and Carol Hosa, which we'll get to both of those ladies in a little bit. So has lost to some of the fighters ranked above her, but a very important fight coming up with her against Jocelyn Edwards. If she can get a win there and bounce back, that would be huge for her. She's already 36, so not a lot of time left for Nora Cornell in the sport either. She does have very heavy hands, though. 67% of her wins do come by way of TKO or KO. That is 6 of her 8 finishes in her career. She's only won by decision one time. And the only way to beat her is to take her to a decision. She has never been finished, never been knocked out, never been submitted. But a big fight coming up for her against Jocelyn Edwards that she really needs to win and make weight for, most importantly, if she wants to fast track herself to the title. Coming in at number 11, we do have a fighter that has already competed for the bantamweight title, and that is, of course, the Brazilian Maida Bueno Silva. Excuse my language there. Um, Difficult name to say, Maida. It's just kind of a difficult pronunciation. But we're just going to call her Shitara. That is her nickname, of course. She is 10-6-1 in her career. Notable wins for her include Lena Landsberg, the Elbow Queen, Wu Yanan, and Jillian Robertson. So Silva actually did compete at 125 for a very brief time. She is the former Battaglia Bantamweight champion, and she challenged for the Bantamweight championship in the UFC against Raquel Pennington, as I mentioned. That was after Amanda Nunes retired. Bueno Silva and Pennington fought for the vacant title. Unfortunately for her, that would be the beginning of a 4-fight losing streak and a 5-fight winless streak, because the fight before that against Holly Holm, she did win in the cage, however, tested positive for a banned substance and had the win overturned. So just really unfortunate luck for Maida Bueno Silva. She was on a 3-fight win streak before then with 2 performance bonuses, and it has just been all downhill for her since then. Some really tough losses after Pennington to Macy Chasson, Jasmine Jazz Davicius, a weight class down, and Jacqueline Cavalcante. So just really unfortunate luck for the Brazilian. Hopefully she can turn it around with a good win in 2026. Now cracking the top 10, we have an up-and-coming contender, and that is Portugal's Jacqueline Cavalcante. She is 10-1 in her young career and only 28 years old, so a long way to go for Jacqueline Cavalcante. Plenty of time for improvement. Notable wins for her do include the previous mentioned Maida Bueno Silva, Julia Avila, and Nora Cornell twice. She has beaten her twice. That is incredibly impressive. The former SEC and LFA Bantamweight champion, she is currently on an 8-fight win streak. Her last loss came in 2022 in the PFL against Martina Jindrova, and she is undefeated in her UFC career 5 fights in. One thing that's kind of holding her back a little bit, 70% of her wins have come by decision. She has not scored a finish in the UFC yet. As a matter of fact, her last finish came in 2022 against Nadia Miljancevic. Man, I'm having trouble with some of these names tonight. My apologies. Just little disclaimer, these videos are just a straight recording, no editing other than just cropping the beginning at the end when I start the recording. So if I mess up here and there, my sincerest apologies. I'm doing my best. These names are not easy, as I'm sure you guys have noticed. But either way, that was her last finish. But I mean, as long as you're winning fights, that's technically the most important thing that matters. She is winning. And as she continues to climb the ladder, I would imagine it's going to be a pretty big name opponent for her inside the top 10 at some point in 2026. She is definitely a name to watch in this division, one of the most promising prospects in the division. And Jacqueline Cavalcante hopefully will get a fight booked in the near future as we enter 2026. Coming in at number 9, we have a stalwart of the bantamweight division. She has been around for quite a while at this point, and that is the Brazilian Carol Rosa. She is 19-7 in her MMA career with notable wins over Nora Cornell, Pani Kianzad, Yana Santos, Betch Correia, and Jocelyn Edwards. She is the former Favela Combat featherweight champion down in Brazil, used to compete at featherweight outside the UFC. She also won a Performance of the Night bonus for her Fight of the Night loss against Irene Aldana in 2023. Unfortunate to come out on the wrong side of that one, but that fight was incredible. I remember watching that fight. Majority of her wins, 68% to be specific, do come by decision, but she does have good grappling with competent striking. To go toe-to-toe with a striker like Irene Aldana shows the pedigree of Carajosa. So she's still a very interesting name to keep an eye on in this division. She's still relatively young, only 31 years old at present, and her losses really do come against some of the best in this division: Eileen Perez, Irene Aldana, Norma Dumont, Sarah McMahon back in 2021. So her losses are not bad losses at all. So Carajosa definitely still has time to improve, and I would say is an important name to keep an eye on as we head to 2026. Now, coming in at number 8 is one of the fighters that I just mentioned has defeated Carajosa, and that is the Argentinian Eileen Perez. She is 12-2 in her career and a very interesting prospect to keep an eye on, 31 years old as well. Her notable wins include Carajosa, Jocelyn Edwards, and Luchi Pudilova. She was the former CFU and Samurai Fighthouse Bantamweight champion outside the UFC and is currently on a very impressive 5-fight win streak, which of course began after her loss to Stephanie Egger. She did miss weight for one of those wins against Daria Zelezniakova. Very unfortunate for Eileen Perez. She missed by half a pound. It was not a very big miss, but a miss nonetheless. She did win that fight by a first round submission. Since then, did rebound with the win against Carajosa, though, so that did extend her win streak. Just needs to dial in that weight a little bit. That's the first time she's missed in her UFC career, so I think she'll be just fine. There must have just been some kind of mishap during the weight cut. But a very big fight for her coming up on February 28th against Macy Chasson, and that is going to be a huge fight in terms of determining the landscape of this division heading into 2026. So, massive fight, a top 10 matchup between Eileen Perez and Macy Chasson. And speaking of the devil, coming in at number 7 is the New Orleans, Louisiana native Macy Chasson. She began her career on featherweight as well, competing on the Ultimate Fighter season 28, which was a women's featherweight season. That division just never really got the legs it needed to get up and running. Macy would, of course, move down to bantamweight. But 10-5 throughout her professional career with notable wins over Maida Bueno Silva, Pani Kianza twice, Norma Dumont, and Marion Renault. So throw in one of the old school OGs in there. Macy, one of the fighters that has had trouble with her weight as well. She has missed weight twice in the UFC for her losses to Raquel Pennington and last fight against Yana Santos. She does have 3 performance bonuses in her career, though. She is a very exciting fighter. She just needs to dial in that weight. She is well-rounded, but she is on a 2-fight losing streak to Ketlin Villeda and Yana Santos, so she has lost to 2 of the best in this division and is looking to get back on track against Eileen Perez on February 28th. That is a very important fight for her. She is 34, so starting to near kind of that upper threshold of age in terms of your fighting career. So her fight against Eileen Perez is going to be very important for her if she wants to get back in that title race. This is a fight that Macy Chasson really needs to win. If she wins this fight, that's a good win over a hype top 10 contender. Gets her right back in position to maybe call out a top 5 opponent. If she loses, that is a 3-fight losing streak, one of which she missed weight in. So this is really starting to turn into a must-win situation for Macy Chasson. She would still probably be ranked in the top 10 even if she loses that fight, but it would be so much more difficult for her to get back to title contention. And with her being 34 already, that is not an easy task. So Macy Chasson in a very important fight for her career coming up against Eileen Perez. And I would think that's going to make that fight a must-watch for fans. Now, coming in at number 6, one of the most exciting fighters in this division, and personally, when this woman has a fight on the books, I'm happy. I love watching her fight. She is all action, incredibly exciting, great striking, and that is the Mexican Irene Aldana. She is 15-8 in her career with some good notable wins over Carajosa, Macy Chasson, Yana Santos, Ketlin Villeda, and Betch Correia. Some very, very impressive wins. Ketlin Villeda, she knocked her out as well. 5 performance bonuses in the UFC as well. As I mentioned, she is incredibly exciting. She did challenge Amanda Nunes for the Bantamweight title. That was back in 2023 in June, which of course she did come up short, and that did end up being Amanda Nunes' retirement fight. So her final title defense did come against Irene Aldana. As I mentioned, a very high-level boxer. Her striking is incredible to watch. Honestly, I would say she probably has the best or second best boxing in the division. You'll see who the best is in a moment. But Incredibly technical boxing and good power, as she has demonstrated throughout her incredible fights. Her knockout of Ketlin Vieira, her fight of the night with Carol. So a very, very exciting fighter to watch, and a good fight against Norma Dumont as well. She got sliced open with one of the worst cuts I have ever seen in the UFC. That was at Noche UFC at the Sphere. That was one of the worst cuts I've ever seen. If you guys are into that thing, if you can stomach that kind of cut and large amount of blood, go watch that fight. Irene Aldana versus Norma Dumont at Noche UFC in 2024. Disgusting. But it looks like she is healing well. She still has a scar. She'll always have a scar. But it looks like she took 2025 just to kind of heal that up a little bit. Hopefully, we will see her back very soon in 2026. Now, cracking the top five, we begin with a surging contender, and that is Russia's Yana Santos. If you don't exactly recognize her, she initially came to the UFC as Yana Kunitskaya, got married to Thiago Santos, a former light heavyweight title challenger, and now goes by her husband's surname, Santos. 17-8 in her professional career with notable wins over Macy Chasson, Misha Tate, Ketlin Vieira, and Marion Renault. She was the Invicta Bantamweight champion when she was signed to the UFC. And when she was signed, she was actually initially scheduled to take on Sarah McMahon in February of 2018. However, there was a bit of a weird situation. It was UFC 222. I believe that was supposed to be Max Holloway and Frankie Edgar. And Max fell out of the fight. Chris Cyborg, the featherweight champion at the time, stepped in. She needed an opponent, and they threw in Yana. So she challenged Chris Cyborg for the featherweight title in her UFC debut, which she absolutely lost. I mean, who's going to win their UFC debut against Chris Cyborg? Come on, Chris Cyborg, one of the greatest female fighters to ever compete in the sport of MMA. But she then moved down to her correct weight, which was bantamweight. She actually lost three in a row from 2021 to 2023 to Irene Aldana, Holly Holm, and Kato. Since then has bounced back with three straight wins over Chelsea Chandler, Misha Tate, and Macy Chasson. So she is really surging as of late. She is already 36 years old, so this really seems like now or never if she wants to go on a title run. But I would imagine she's going to get a big name opponent inside the top five in 2026. And Yana Santos definitely going to be an important player in this division in the coming 12 months. Coming in at number four, another fighter that has been at the top of this division for a while, but just has not been able to quite crack the title picture yet and get that ever elusive shot at a UFC title. And that is Ketlin Vieira. She's 15-5 in her professional career. Some notable wins for her include Macy Chasson, Penny Kianzad, Holly Holm, Misha Tate, Kat Zingano, and Sarah McMahon. Some very impressive throwback names there for Vieira. She was undefeated in her first 10 professional fights before finally dropping her first one to Irene Aldana in the UFC when she was knocked out. So she has gone 5-5 since then, a big mixed bag of results for her. She has missed weight twice in her UFC career as well against Yana Santos and Macy Chasson, which was her last win. And just kind of a little bit of unfortunate luck for Caitlin Vieira, as her last three have come against Kayla Harrison, which was a loss, a win against Macy Chasson, where she missed weight, and a loss against Norma Dumont late in 2025. So as I mentioned, she just comes up short right when she gets to knocking on the door of a title shot. Something like that happens and she comes up just short. So hopefully she can rebound in 2026. She is still fairly young compared to the rest of the contenders we've seen. She's 34, so her title window a little bit longer than the rest of these contenders, and she is inside the top five. So she's not in a bad position at all, but she definitely needs to get a couple wins if she wants to get a shot at that title. The bantamweight title picture, to be completely honest, is probably the most thin in the women's divisions at the moment. There's not really a true standout in the rankings at the moment. And Ketlin Vieira, with a couple impressive wins, could really stamp her name into that title picture. Now, coming in at number three, we have a contender that honestly breathes some new life into the division. She's a little bit on the older side for a newer contender, but she is at least fresh with some new matchups on the horizon, and that is Norma Dumont, the Immortal. She is 13-2 in her career with some very impressive notable wins over Ketlin Vieira, Irene Aldana, Jermaine Durandamy, Kato Aspen Ladd, and Felicia Spencer. So Norma Dumont did begin her UFC career as a featherweight. She has unfortunately missed weight 3 times in her UFC career. That was pretty early on, but she even actually had a scheduled bout against Erin Blanchfield at bantamweight, which she ended up missing weight for, and the bout was canceled. But since her loss to Macy Chasson in 2022, she has made weight for 6 straight fights, and she won all 6 wins in a row. So Norma Dumont has really put her career back together and surged up the bantamweight rankings. 85% of her wins do come by decision. She has 2 submission wins, and the rest of her 11 wins are by decision, but that does not mean she is not exciting. As I mentioned earlier, her fight against Irene Aldana at the Sphere, go watch it. It was bloody, it was violent, it was nasty. Norma Dumont, definitely a contender to keep an eye on. She does not currently have a fight booked at the moment, but she is coming off an impressive win over Ketlin Vieira in November. I would like to see her against one of the top 2, and that is probably the most likely scenario before she gets a title shot, and we will get to the title picture in a moment. I know it seems a little bit murky right now, but there is a little bit of a nugget right before we get to the champion, and that'll explain everything. But Norma Dumont, with a win over either the number 1 or number 2 ranked contender, probably more likely to get a title shot with a win over the number 1, but the number 2 would do as well. But definitely someone that could find herself in a title fight. I don't know about by the end of 2026, but maybe early 2027, just depending on how the title picture shakes out. Now, coming in at number 2, we have one of the OGs of this division. She has been here since the beginning, the division's inception in 2013, and the former queen of the 135 pounders, and that is the former champion Raquel Pennington. She is 16-9 in her MMA career with notable wins over Maida Bueno Silva, which she won the title against, Ketlin Vieira, Aspen Ladd, Macy Chasson, Irene Aldana, Misha Tate, Jessica Andrade, and the pioneer and legend Roxanne Modafferi. As I mentioned, the former UFC Bantamweight champion won that championship against Maida Bueno Silva in a vacant title fight. Immediately lost it in her first defense against Juliana Pena, which was unfortunate. So a short-lived championship reign for Rocky. But that fight against Pena, a lot of people thought Pennington won. That was a very, very close fight. She did win an amateur title in the Rocky Mountain Bad Boys organization, and interestingly, it was against JJ Aldrich, who, as we've seen, is the number 14 ranked contender at flyweight. Bit of an interesting matchup there on the amateur scene. And of course, as I mentioned, or actually, I did not mention this yet. She challenged Amanda Nunes for the bantamweight title back when Amanda was the champion. That fight was very one-sided. Amanda beat her down. Pennington actually wanted to stop the fight in between the 4th and the 5th round, but went out there like a warrior. Unfortunately, got beat down in a puddle of her own blood for it, but went out on her shield just like any champion would want to. Of course, the redemption story was great as she did eventually win the title, but as of now, sitting at the number 2 spot in this division, she has not fought since losing her title to Juliana Pena. She did have a fight on the books against Norma Dumont in September of 2025. Pennington unfortunately did get injured and have to pull out, so we did not see her in 2025. I would personally like to see that Norma Dumont fight rebooked, or if Norma fights the number 1 contender, but she's got to fight one of these two between the number 1 and number 2 ranked women in this division. But speaking of the number 1 contender, and this is another former champion in this division, actually held the belt in 2 separate occasions, and that is the Venezuelan vixen, Juliana Pena. She is 11-6 in her UFC career with notable wins over Raquel Pennington, Amanda Nunes, Sarah McMahon, Nico Montano, and Kat Zingano. She's been in the UFC for a long time as well, made her debut all the way back in 2013 at the Ultimate Fighter 18 finale, a season in which she won. She was also the former Excite Fight champion as an amateur. She was undefeated in her amateur career, 3 fights before turning professional. She's pretty well rounded. I would say her toughness is probably her greatest attribute, though. The punishment she took from Amanda Nunes in their rematch was just insane. How she survived all 25 minutes, I have no idea. But of course, the way she won the title the first time, one of the greatest upsets in the entire history of the sport, submitting Amanda Nunes in the second round, just wore Amanda down, beat her down, exhausted her, and got the rear naked choke. One of the most incredible moments in the history of the sport, upsetting the greatest women's fighter of all time in that fashion. as I mentioned, was dominantly beaten in the rematch, but no one will ever take that moment away from Juliana Pena. Now, there is one more name to get to before we come to the champion, and I'm sure you guys might have noticed that I haven't quite said who I think is going to be next for the champion yet. None of these women have title fights booked. None of these women inside the top five really even have a fight booked, period. So, who is next for the champion? Now, this is where things get a little bit murky because we now introduce the greatest women's female fighter, or women's fighter, sorry, of all time, and that is the Lioness Amanda Nunes. Now, the reason we introduce her is, as you see at the bottom of the page, she is scheduled to fight Kayla Harrison on January 24th. Amanda Nunes was the bantamweight and featherweight champion and then retired after her win against Irene Aldana. Nunes later would announce she wants to come back. And of course, with a fighter of her pedigree, she is absolutely going to be given an immediate title shot upon her return. So Amanda Nunes will be the next title challenger for the champion Kayla Harrison. We'll get to Kayla in a moment. But first, let's focus on the greatest female fighter in the history of MMA and the UFC. 23-5 in her career, her notable wins. It's the most incredible notable wins section I think I've run down in any of the Meet the Fighters so far. Irene Aldana, Juliana Pena, former champion. Jermaine Durandamy twice, the former featherweight champion. Holly Holm, the former bantamweight champion and featherweight title challenger. Chris Cyborg, the former featherweight champion. Raquel Pennington, the former bantamweight champion. Valentina Shevchenko twice, the two-time flyweight champion, second greatest female fighter of all time. Ronda Rousey, the reason women are in the UFC, the former bantamweight champion. Another former bantamweight champion, Amisha Tate, and a former Strikeforce featherweight champion and a legend outside the UFC and women's MMA and a pioneer as well, Julia Budd. Her notable wins list, you couldn't even take it to Hollywood and give them her notable wins list. They would probably say it's too far-fetched to turn it into a movie. The former two-time UFC bantamweight champion, she defended her belt 5 times in her first reign, while simultaneously defending her featherweight championship twice before her loss to Juliana Pena. Won the belt back from Pena, defended once against Irene Aldana, and called it a career before later deciding she wanted to come back. She lost to Kat Zingano all the way back in 2014 and then went on a 12-fight unbeaten streak in which she just decimated the best of the best in the female divisions. She has incredible finishing instinct. She's probably the greatest finisher in the history of women's MMA. And the reason I kind of hesitated on Irene Aldana is Amanda Nunes' boxing is probably the best in women's MMA. It is just incredible to watch her. Just her overall game. She can wrestle you. She can dominate you on the ground. She can submit you. She can knock you out with her hands. She can knock you out with her legs. I mean, she is just so incredibly good. And she has this incredible instinct for finishing fighters with their best weapons. Like, she knocked Ronda Rousey out in under a minute. She outdueled Valentina Shevchenko twice. Knocked out Chris Cyborg, which was Chris Cyborg's most famous way of fighting. She would just go in there and bulldoze people, and Amanda finished her in under a minute. Head kicked Holly Holm, which of course Holm is famous for her head kick knockout against Ronda Rousey. Outdogged Juliana Pena. Outboxed Irene Aldana. There's nothing you can say about Amanda Nunes other than great things. She is an incredible human being, an incredible ambassador of the sport, the greatest female fighter of all time, and I can't wait to watch her return on January 24th in the co-main event of UFC 324. And now, of course, that means it is time to introduce her opponent on January 24th, the reigning, defending, undisputed bantamweight champion of the UFC, and that is Kayla Harrison. She is 19-1 in her MMA career with notable wins over Juliana Pena, who she beat to claim the UFC title, Ketlin Vieira, Holly Holm, Aspen Ladd, and Larissa Pacheco twice. She is the former PFL lightweight champion. That's right. She competed at 155 pounds in the PFL before coming to the UFC, and that weight cut to 135 just looks like absolute hell for Kayla Harrison. But one of the most incredible examples of professionalism. She makes that weight every time, no complaints. She also is one of the most accomplished combat resumes in women's MMA, as she competed in the Olympics in judo in 2012 and 2016 and actually won gold both times, which is just insane. There's only two Olympic gold medalists in the UFC's history to hold titles, and that is Henry Cejudo and Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison has two gold medals and a UFC title. So you could argue across all of combat, she's right up there with Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko as some of the most accomplished women in combat sports. She was undefeated in her first 15 professional fights before losing a unanimous decision to Larissa Pacheco in the 2022 PFL Lightweight Tournament Championship. Um, has gone on to win 4 fights in a row, her final fight in the PFL, and then her 3 in the UFC, culminating in her Bantamweight title win over Juliana Pena. She won a performance bonus for that as well. And of course, her and Amanda do have history. They both trained at American Top Team for a long time. Amanda Nunes, after losing to Juliana Pena, would leave and kind of start doing her own thing. Um, that kind of rubbed Kayla Harrison the wrong way, and the friction kind of started from there. Once Kayla came over to the UFC, it kind of seemed inevitable that Amanda would come back and these two would clash. And now that Kayla's the champion on the first Paramount Plus card in the UFC's history, this is the perfect time to put on this fight. Kayla Harrison and Amanda Nunes have history. They have a real rivalry. And I think this is going to be an incredible fight. Two of the most accomplished women in the history of combat sports going head to head with the title on the line when the GOATs return. You can't ask for much more for the co-main event of UFC 324. So Kayla Harrison, the reigning champion, Amanda Nunes throws herself right back into the mix. 135 really has potential to be one of the bigger divisions this year for the women, especially because there is talks that maybe Valentina Shevchenko moves up to fight the winner of Kayla Harrison and Amanda Nunes. Time will tell because, as I said, there's really not a clear-cut number one contender at 135 right now. Juliana Pena has already been beat down by Amanda Nunes as well as Raquel Pennington. And Kayla Harrison mauled Juliana Pena completely. There's not really much interest to see that fight again. Raquel Pennington got beat by Amanda Nunes very easily. So Norma Dumont really is the most interesting, fresh contender. One of these women is really going to have to make a big statement to push herself for that title, but honestly, at this point, with the way it's shaking out, I like the contenders at 125 pounds, and I would love to see Valentina Shevchenko defend her title down there a couple more times. However, it would be much better for the 135-pound division if Valentina Shevchenko moved up because she would generate so much more interest than any of these other 135ers could. I mean, once Kayla or Amanda wins, who's next? And honestly, we might even see both of them retire after the fight. That cut to 135 for Kayla Harrison is absolutely brutal, and Amanda's coming back from retirement. Who knows how long she'll stick around if she wins? So 135 pounds is really in a weird spot right now. And thank God we have this big fight between Kayla Harrison and Amanda Nunes, because if it weren't for that, I don't really think there would be that much excitement for the division coming into 2026. So hopefully this fight lives up to the hype. Hopefully there's a contender that emerges or two. As I mentioned, a few good fighters to keep an eye on. Luana Santos and Jacqueline Cavalcante trying to work their way up. Maybe Norma Dumont makes a statement. Maybe Yana Santos continues her momentum. Eileen Perez can make a big statement. But somebody in this division is going to have to step up and make a statement this year in order to challenge for the title after Amanda. But thank you guys for tuning in. That completes the women's divisions. We will have the men's divisions coming up next, kicking off with the flyweight division. Can't wait to see you guys then. Peace.